Alright, let's get into this because there's a decision brewing inside the Browns building right now that could end up defining Andrew Berry's entire offseason, and most fans have no idea it's even happening. Training camp is live, pads are popping, and every single rep is starting to carry real weight for guys whose roster spots are anything but guaranteed. I've got two stories today that are actually tangled up with each other in a way that I think is going to surprise you. The first is about the traffic jam at quarterback and why one insider believes Cleveland might be forced to keep a rookie passer, even if the roster math says otherwise. The second is about a pair of rookie draft picks who are quietly staring down the very real possibility of not making the initial 53-man roster at all. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you'll see exactly how these two stories collide. Let's start with the quarterback room, because honestly, this might be the most complicated position battle anywhere in the league right now. Everybody's locked in on the obvious question, who wins the starting job? But underneath that headline fight, there's a second, quieter battle happening that could hand Andrew Berry one of the toughest roster calls of his entire tenure. According to Sports Illustrated insider Nick Padone, rookie quarterback Tylen Green might have a far stronger case to stick on this roster than most people initially assumed, and it has nothing to do with draft slot or reputation. It comes down to something much simpler. Other teams around this league are watching him, and watching him closely. Padone laid it out plainly. An NFC North team was reportedly locked in on Green before the draft and had every intention of selecting him if Cleveland hadn't beaten them to the punch. Sit with that for a second, because it completely changes how you should think about this roster spot. If the Browns try to cut Green during final roster cuts, he doesn't just quietly slide onto the practice squad, he has to clear waivers first. And according to Padone, there's a genuine chance another franchise puts in a claim the moment he hits that wire. It's not only NFC teams either. He specifically flagged the possibility of an AFC North rival snatching him up, which would be about as painful an outcome as you can imagine, watching a division rival scoop up a player you spent a 6th-round pick on before he ever got the chance to develop inside your own system. And when you actually look at what Green brings physically, it's not hard to understand the interest. This is a quarterback standing right around 6'7" with rare athletic tools, a true dual threat who can beat you with his arm just as easily as he beats you with his legs. That combination of size and mobility just doesn't show up very often at this level. Padone even went as far as saying Green's ceiling, purely from an athletic standpoint, might exceed what Dillon Gabriel brings to the table. Now, that's not a knock on Gabriel, and it's not a claim that Green is the better quarterback today. It's simply an acknowledgement that his raw upside is exceptional. The Browns knew exactly what they were getting when they drafted him, a long-term developmental project with tools that are genuinely rare. The problem is that potential doesn't fill out a roster. 53 spots is 53 spots, and most teams around this league only carry 3 quarterbacks for a reason. Carrying 4 quarterbacks through an entire season is brutally difficult. Every single roster spot matters this time of year. Injuries hit. Special teams units need bodies. Rotations shift week to week. And when you dedicate an extra spot to a 4th quarterback, that's a spot you're pulling from somewhere else, usually somewhere the team can genuinely feel it. That tension is exactly why this situation has gotten so complicated so fast. But here's the thing about Andrew Berry, and Padone was quick to point this out too. If there's one general manager in this league who's shown he can navigate exactly this kind of squeeze creatively, it's him. Berry has built a real reputation for finding ways out of situations that would trap most other front offices. Just look at last offseason, when the Browns brought in Kenny Pickett and then flipped him before he ever took a regular season snap in Cleveland. That's the blueprint. It shows Berry isn't afraid to get creative if it protects the value of an asset. Maybe a trade materializes somewhere down the line. Maybe another team suffers a quarterback injury and suddenly needs a body. Maybe Berry finds a way to turn Green into something instead of just losing him for nothing. The point is, Browns fans probably shouldn't assume this ends with a simple release and a shrug. Now, not everybody sees it that way. Fellow Sports Illustrated writer Daniel Fisher looked at this exact same situation and landed in a very different place. Fisher isn't convinced Green's roster spot is anywhere near as safe as some fans are hoping. In his view, people might be overestimating how likely it actually is that Cleveland carries 4 quarterbacks into the regular season. Fisher's read is that the Browns may ultimately conclude Green is simply too far from finished to justify one of those precious 53 spots. There's been chatter floating around that Cleveland could move on from Dillon Gabriel to clear room for Green, but Fisher doesn't buy that as a realistic outcome, and honestly, when you think about it, neither do I. Gabriel was a third-round investment. Even if some analysts felt that pick was a bit of a reach on draft day, Andrew Berry put real capital into that selection, and general managers don't typically abandon a third-round quarterback after a single season. Doing that basically amounts to publicly admitting the evaluation was wrong before the player even had time to prove otherwise, and that's not a conclusion front offices reach easily. So follow the logic here. If Watson isn't going anywhere, if Shedeur Sanders is viewed as part of this franchise's long-term future, and if Gabriel still has real organizational investment behind him, that leaves exactly one player whose spot on this roster suddenly looks shaky, and that's Tylen Green. Fisher didn't hold back praising the athletic tools, but he was equally honest about where the passing game currently sits. The mechanics still need real refinement. The consistency isn't where it needs to be yet to trust him in live NFL reps. That's why Fisher floated what might actually be the ideal outcome for Cleveland, releasing Green outright and hoping he slides through waivers unclaimed so they can stash him on the practice squad and keep developing him away from the pressure of live game reps. Except that's an enormous gamble. If even one team puts in a claim, he's gone, and Browns fans would spend years wondering what could have been if that raw talent ever came together. This entire picture is about to get a whole lot clearer because training camp is officially underway, and every single practice from here forward carries real consequences. And speaking of consequences, there's another major development out of Berea that Browns fans need to hear. New head coach Todd Monken made it unmistakably clear that nobody has won the starting job. Not Deshaun Watson, not Shedeur Sanders, nobody. Heading into camp, you've got analysts across the league making compelling cases on both sides. Some believe Watson deserves one final real opportunity to become the quarterback this franchise thought it was signing when it committed $230 million fully guaranteed dollars to him. Others believe it's time to stop waiting and hand the keys to the future, meaning Sanders. But Monken isn't interested in crowning anybody off reputation alone. Standing in front of reporters on the opening day of camp at the Cross Country Mortgage campus in Berea, he delivered exactly the message Browns fans have been begging to hear for years. There will absolutely be a starting quarterback under center in Week 1 against Jacksonville on September 13th. That much is certain. But how that decision gets made is the part that matters. The players themselves are going to determine this. Their play decides it. Not the media narrative, not draft position, not the size of a contract. Performance, full stop. According to Mary Kay Cabot, Monken plans to stay patient through the entirety of camp before he commits to anything, and honestly, that's probably the smartest approach available to him. Now, back during OTAs and minicamp, the early word was that Deshaun Watson looked noticeably more comfortable running Monken's system. He was reportedly getting extended first-team reps and looked more at ease than we've seen him in a long time. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Browns fans have heard encouraging offseason reports before. Plenty of them. And the actual production during Watson's time in Cleveland hasn't come close to matching those expectations. Across his tenure here, he's appeared in only 19 games while throwing 19 touchdown passes. Those numbers simply do not reflect what anyone envisioned when this organization made one of the biggest quarterback investments in modern NFL history. Even in the best-case scenario, where Watson somehow delivers a strong final contract year, the deeper question about this franchise's long-term quarterback future doesn't just disappear. And that's exactly why so much of the excitement in this building is centered around Shedeur Sanders. The 5th-round pick has already started building real momentum. Last season, he threw for over 1,400 yards with 7 passing touchdowns across 7 starts. Those numbers won't jump off the page, but they're a legitimate foundation for a young quarterback stepping into this level. and early in camp, he's already flashing. Working with rookie receivers Jamari Thrash and Denzel Boston on the second unit, Sanders uncorked a gorgeous deep shot to Boston during 11-on-11 work. Later, during 7-on-7 drills, he connected with Thrash on a crisp deep out route. Those are precisely the kinds of moments a coaching staff wants to see from a young quarterback trying to force his way into the conversation. Still, Monken was careful to remind everyone this isn't strictly a two-man race. All four quarterbacks are in the mix. That includes Watson, Sanders, Dillon Gabriel, and Tylen Green. They won't get equal practice reps, and that part isn't changing. Just like this spring, Watson and Sanders will continue rotating with the first-team offense, while the staff keeps evaluating everyone else beneath them. That means these next few preseason games suddenly carry enormous weight. Cleveland faces Chicago on August 15th, Buffalo on August 22nd, and New England on August 27th. Any one of those three games has the potential to completely reshape how this competition looks heading into Week 1. Now let's circle back to that second story, because it ties directly into everything we just covered. Daniel Fisher identified two Browns rookies who are genuinely in danger of missing the initial 53-man roster once camp wraps up. The first name won't shock you. It's Tylen Green. Fisher keeps coming back to the same numbers problem at quarterback. With Watson, Sanders, and Gabriel already occupying roster spots, Green is fighting an uphill battle despite being a 182nd overall selection out of Arkansas. Fisher's stance is that the Browns almost certainly aren't parting with Watson, and it's just as unlikely they abandon Sanders this early into his development. That leaves Gabriel and Green essentially competing for what might be the final quarterback spot if Cleveland decides to only carry 3 into the regular season. Green's athleticism at roughly 6'6" and 230 pounds isn't in question, but Fisher was blunt that the passing game still needs serious refinement. If the Browns believe stashing him on the practice squad gives him the best runway for long-term growth, that might end up being the route they take, even knowing full well another team could swoop in and claim him. The second name Fisher flagged is Carson Ryan, the 7th-round tight end out of BYU. Ryan is an interesting case because he proved in college he can line up as both a traditional tight end and a fullback, which gives him some real positional versatility. But his issue isn't talent or effort. It's simply how jammed Cleveland's tight end room already is. The Browns currently have Harold Fannin Jr., Blake Whiteheart, Jack Stoll, and fellow rookie Joe Royer, a 5th-round pick this year, all competing for reps at that position. Add in veteran fullback Michael Burton already occupying a roster spot, and it becomes genuinely difficult to see a clean path for Ryan onto the initial 53 unless he puts together an outstanding camp or proves he can be a real special teams contributor. Fisher believes that, much like Green, Ryan could realistically end up developing on the practice squad instead. And honestly, that's what makes this stretch of the offseason so thrilling and so nerve-wracking at the exact same time. Every single practice is another chance for these young players to prove they belong. Every preseason snap has the potential to alter the trajectory of somebody's career. For Andrew Berry and Todd Monken, these decisions were never going to be simple. They have to weigh long-term upside against immediate roster needs, positional depth against the very real risk of losing a talented young player to another team for nothing in return. As fans, all we can really do right now is watch these competitions play out and hope this front office gets the calls right, because one wrong decision at quarterback, or with a player who turns into something special somewhere else, is the kind of thing that gets talked about for years. And really, that's what this entire situation comes down to. The Browns aren't just figuring out who fills out a roster. They're laying the foundation for this franchise under Todd Monken, and the quarterback decisions made over these next few weeks could shape the direction of this team well beyond just the 2026 season. Personally, I think Tylen Green might be the single toughest call on this entire roster. His upside is impossible to ignore, and knowing another team was reportedly ready to draft him the moment Cleveland passed, it's hard to imagine this front office simply letting him walk through waivers without a real fight to keep him in the building. At the same time, Fisher raises a completely fair point. Carrying 4 quarterbacks isn't realistic for the vast majority of NFL teams. and if the staff genuinely believes Green needs a full year to develop as a passer, they'll have to decide whether that long-term upside is worth sacrificing depth somewhere else on this roster. Then you look at Carson Ryan, and it's honestly hard not to feel for the kid a little. Sometimes making an NFL roster has nothing to do with how well you actually play. It comes down to timing and opportunity. With Fannin, Royer, Whiteheart, Stoll, and a veteran fullback all fighting for the same handful of snaps, Ryan is staring down one of the toughest paths on this entire roster. That doesn't mean he isn't good enough to be here. It just tells you how competitive this Browns roster has become across the board. And then there's the biggest storyline running through all of it, the quarterback competition itself. Todd Monken has made it abundantly clear that nobody is being handed anything. Watson brings the experience. Sanders brings the buzz and the belief of an entire fan base. Gabriel is still a former third-round investment the front office isn't ready to walk away from. And Green carries long-term upside that at least one other franchise wanted badly enough to nearly beat Cleveland to the punch. Every practice, every preseason snap against Chicago, Buffalo, and New England is going to matter in ways we can't fully predict yet. And honestly, that's exactly what fans have been asking for all along. No politics, no favoritism. Just let the best player on the field earn it. We're finally reaching the part of the offseason where opinions stop mattering and actual performance takes over. The speculation has been fun, the insider reports have been interesting, but once these preseason games kick off, the tape doesn't lie to anybody. And hopefully, when Week 1 against Jacksonville finally arrives, this organization won't just have picked a starting quarterback. They'll know, deep down, that they made the right call, not just for this season, but for the future of this franchise.